So, hey everybody, good evening. Welcome to the third session of Journeying Home, a series of shiurim classes on the meaning of Teshuvah, which is often translated as repentance, but as we've seen in the last few sessions, and especially today, Teshuvah is really about a practice of self-critique that then provides us the information we need to lay out a plan for our personal growth, to change into someone new, change into someone we are excited to become. So today is actually going to be all about what in a fancy term, autopoiesis, which means self-fashioning or self-creation, the notion that you can become someone different or even someone new, that you are not condemned or confined to your past, but the way that time works is that it is oriented forwards. It moves into the future always, which means that something is always possible to change. Specifically, you are always have the possibility to change. And that's really the exciting thing that we saw actually in the tail end of last week's session, that Rosh Hashanah is not a mournful day or even an ascetic day like on Yom Kippur, but it's a celebratory day because it is the renewal of the contract, of the agreement that we have with God. It is the refreshing of that relationship. And we ended on this very kind of striking and lingering and resonant note of the relationship between ourselves and God, partaking of that spirit of renewal. And that's precisely where we're going to lead into our class today. So I'm going to open this source sheet and we will look at it together. It is, we'll start with some rabbinic text, but then we'll move into really a pas de deux between Rambam and Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, also known as the Rav, who really defines the hashkafa, the ideology, the theology behind modern Orthodoxy. So a rabbi based in Boston for the majority of his career, who helped found the Maimonides School. You see, Maimonides is very important to him, and was a professor at Yeshiva University, renowned for his very philosophical take on traditional Judaism, really juicing the traditional texts for their philosophical worth, much in the light of the way that Maimonides did, whom we've already encountered. So there we go. All right, Clippy, I do not need your help. All right, great. So I'll share the screen. Okay, great. So this is a very interesting text that we see in Vayikra Rabbah, which is the rabbinic commentary, rabbinic expanded edition of the book of Leviticus. And it is a fascinating, provocative idea, something that we think we usually associate, especially with evangelical Christianity. But we see actually there is a notion of being born again that we see in Judaism as well. The notion of actually becoming something or someone new. So I'll kick us off. So this is Rabbi Tachlifa of Caesarea said, and all of the additional offerings, referring to the Musaf offerings, right, which are the special sacrifices that were offered on Shabbat and the holidays. That's what distinguished them from the normal everyday offering, the Tamid offering. It's usually written in the Torah, it says, and you shall offer, v'hikravtem. But on Rosh Hashanah, uniquely, it says, v'asisem isha. You should make a fire offering, isha. Why is this? The Holy One said to Israel, my children, since you have entered before me in judgment and left with a pardon, I will count it for you as if you were made before me today, as if I created you as a new creature this day. This is the understanding of that which is written, for as the new heaven and the new earth. So did anyone catch what the pun is? Why is it that the unique phrase in Rosh Hashanah is Asisem Isheh sparks this this creative reading of the material? Maxine?
Is it to play on like Isha, like fire offering, and then Ish as in man?
Yeah, that's right. I think
Okay.
Isha, because it means person, and
Right, yeah.
and Ish or Isha meaning people,
Mhm.
and Isha meaning fire offering. Right. So it's a pun on the word Isha. It says, and you should make a person. That's what happens on Rosh Hashanah. It's not that like, okay, fine, it's a sacrifice, but really what happens on Rosh Hashanah is you make a person. You make yourself a person again, or you make this person of yourself again. Because God says, because you have come before me, laying it all out, right? And when we sing judgment, what we really mean is this critique, right? This like looking at yourself with a critical eye. And I don't mean critical like bad, bad, bad. Critical in the sense of the way you'd like evaluate something, or you'd assess like a diamond for its facets, for what it's for its brilliance, right? You look at actually the nature or the substance of who and what you are, and that is also what God is doing. And you leave cleansed. And you leave as if you've become a new person. For it's the new heaven and the new earth. A whole new world. The song. Max Kadushin was also a 20th century, mid-20th century rabbi. He taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary. He was associated with Jewish Theological Seminary. He published with them. And he has really actually interesting philosophical commentary on this text. He says, since you have entered before me and in judgment, blah, 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 and you have become a new creature, he says, because you have done Teshuvah and were judged favorably, you are not the same person you were when you were sinners. A person is not twice born, but made anew at every Rosh Hashanah. Because you've done Teshuvah, then you're actually not the same person anymore. There's a sense of like a break or a sense of discontinuity. That seems to be the case, that you are like something changed and suddenly you're a new person. There's not a sense of contiguity with the person that you were. Now, what do you think of that? Is that freeing? Is that troubling? Is that exciting? Is that angering?
I mean, I think that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Say more.
Like it's an opportunity to be a new person. And you don't get that very often at that level, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And to imagine something entirely different and sort of bring that into a new reality, like really break free. So it's freeing and exciting at the same time. I really have a hard time imagining how someone could be like upset or have bad feelings about that, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
Maybe someone might, I don't know.
Well, let's see.
Well, I can see like in some ways, yes, that would be really exciting. And sometimes it does feel like it would be, kind of convenient to be able to make kind of a clean break, say like, okay, this is the new person I am now, we can just leave everything else behind. But I don't know, just for me that feels really destabilizing. Like even if there are things that I want to change or improve on, like I feel like I've put a lot of work into a lot of the things that have brought me to where I am. And, just starting out as a completely new person is a bit frightening.
I guess you have the two extremes in the group.
Yeah.
Susie?
Okay. I mean, I like the idea of it. Like at first, like that fresh start, clean break thing sounds good, but then it doesn't make sense to me about like how do you learn from your mistakes, or how do you hold that history of your life and your culture, and where does things like I forget the word of it, but like that inherited sort of experience and trauma, like I really understood that expression, inherited trauma, when there was the shooting.
Yeah.
Last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And like
epigenetics.
Yeah, and it was like, why am I feeling like this this trauma about things that I've never experienced, kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
so like I like the
Mm-hmm.
psychological idea of like, yay, I get to start fresh, but then there's pieces of it that don't make sense to me.
Right.
That you lose all continuity with.
Right. It sounds like you're critical, like you're skeptical of the idea even. That it doesn't
Mhm.
kind of map to our experience.
But-
Yeah, I guess I am.
You're still like haunted by, I don't know, like, yeah, so like I mean, actually, interestingly, Rambam actually gets into this below, although we're not gonna focus on that, but like you are fashioned by your environment, by your lineage, by the, you know, your home environment, your parents, right? I mean, there's therapy, right? You know, we're always about our parents, right? Right, Mom? But besides that, like we're also fashioned by like the culture we live in, by the time period we live in, right? Everything is situational, everything is contingent in that kind of way. But on the other hand, I think that's the thing, like there's this dialectic. On the other hand, there is this notion that something changes inside of you, and that means that you, like, something is now different. There's something new that has erupted in the world that wasn't there before in you. So the question is, like, when you change, what is your relationship with your past? Is I think, provocatively troubling one, especially with, let's say, like kind of if you turn up the volume on Teshuvah, right, in terms of its drastic nature or dynamic, intense nature. You know, there are plenty of people who are trying to run away from who they've been or who they are. And on that note, right? Like, is that even? I mean, is that a healthy reaction, right, to choices we made in the past, or is that a compassionate reaction to the person that we have been? So does this actually provide a helpful fantasy of sorts, or is this actually in some ways re-entrenching us in, let's say, a totemic relationship to the person we have been, and we now are like in this tense contest of sorts to make sure we don't like backslide, we don't become the person we used to be, or we're still in some ways chained to the person we were because now we're different, right? We're defining ourselves against our past, which means in some ways we're not freed from our past. We're still there because we still feel defined by it. Yeah.
But Josh, can I just, yeah, I think, so I don't know, in a class that I took this summer, we learned something about how each point of like free will, like it, if you pass your sort of test, it unleashes a whole new sort of menu of options. And so the way that I understood this opportunity was just there was more like a spiritual way to unleash like a new level for you from a spiritual place, and that has consequences, of course, in real life, but it's less so about hating who you were and that dichotomy, and just more about really having an opportunity for your soul, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But less so like, okay, this is the old me and this is the new me and that's bad and this good, because it's not.
Yeah. No, I think it's necessary. I think I'm trying to sketch out, I think, the different ways of relating to this. That I think there are plenty of examples of times in which people are wanting to change, but from something versus to something.
Yeah.
No, but the truth is, like, I think, like, but even the most extreme version of the fantasy of like becoming a new person, a new creature, is itself like quite compelling, right? Like the radical freedom of being someone new, undefined, unhindered, carefree, right? Like I think I think it's a fascinating idea, and I want to call it a fantasy, not in the sense that it's like not real, but in the sense that it's something that we imagine for ourselves. But I want to see what kind of paths for growth that these texts provide for us. But that what I actually kind of really mean is, how do we relate to ourselves as we change? How do we take up the past and alchemically transform it to somehow render someone new? So we're going to see both sides of it in the Rambam. I'm trying to make this a little bit smaller because the font is so big. Okay, there we go. Okay. So some of these translations were inherited. I didn't get a chance to gender neutralize them. Apologies. I will translate them gender neutrally as I read them out loud, or if someone else reads them out loud. Please have that in mind if you can. What's the word I'm looking for? Improvisationally? No. Extemporaneously. There we go. Like debate, from speech to debate. All right. So here is like, we start actually with a point of Rambam's in which he says, actually, he defines the limit of something, right? It is impossible. Now, this is from a text called Shemona Parakim, the 8 chapters, which is Rambam's commentary. It's like a text within a text. It is his expanded essayistic commentary on Pirkei Avot, right? On the rabbinic text of ethics, usually called Ethics of Our Ancestors, Ethics of Chapters of Our Fathers, literally. In which the rabbis give a bunch of, adages, apodictic sayings, about fragmentary sayings sometimes on how to be a person, and it is like grist for the mill for the commentaries. So many commentaries on Pirkei Avos, and it's kind of becomes the place where rabbis and Jewish writers get to kind of play out their own theories of ethics. So here's Rambam's long-form commentary on Pirkei Avos. He says in the last chapter of the 8th chapter, chapter 8, he says, "It is impossible for a person to be born endowed by nature from their very birth with either virtue or vice. Just as it is important that they should be born skilled by nature in any particular art," by which he means, Rambam means a skill. So just to translate it into normal human language, Rambam is radically anti-deterministic. He says it is not possible for a person to be born defined as either good or bad. Defined by their positive trait, negative trait. Their positive habit or their negative habit. No one is born a virtuosic pianist, right? You need to do your, 10,000 hours to become your virtuosic pianist. It is possible, however, that through natural causes, one may from birth be so constituted as to have a predilection for a particular virtue or vice. But Rambam isn't naive. Some people have certain predispositions or potentials to become something versus another. I'm 5'6". I was never going to become a basketball player. That just was not in my cards. No matter how many times I shot hoops in the driveway, I was never going to be an NBA player. This is how it is. But one has, let's say, a certain array of possibilities in their life, but nothing is going to make you get there. Nothing's going to make you get there. But if one who inclines constitutionally toward a certain excellence is left entirely without instruction, and if their faculties are not stimulated, right? If they don't get the training that they need, if they don't get the practice that they need, if they don't have the supportive environment that they need, then one will undoubtedly remain ignorant. And by ignorant, what Rambam means is unexceptional in that certain trait or practice. Okay. So we have this dialectic between radical possibility, radical freedom, radical potential, and then also a certain, let's say, realistic narrowing of what one can realistically achieve in this world. But point being, while let's say not every possibility is open to every single one of us, nothing is determined for us. You can't just kick back and let fate take its hand. You need to, in some way, actualize or activate what lies in potential for you. And it's only up to whether you can get off your duff and commit yourself to the 10,000 hours, right? To the diligent practice it is to become the person that you can be. The thing you can do, right? Playing guitar or singing a song, or like using your voice, writing, cooking, baking rugelach, whatever it is. You have to practice, practice, practice. You know the joke. There's a Yitzhak Perlman gets in a cab, and the cabbie says, "Where are you going?" And Yitzhak Perlman says, "I'm going to Carnegie Hall." And he says, "Oh, okay." And he says, the cabbie's new. He just started his cab business. He just got his medallion. So cabbie says, "How do you get there?" And Yitzhak Perlman says, "Practice, practice, practice, then take a left." So, point is that the route that we're on, right, the path that our lives can take is determined by our participation in it. There is a destination. There are multiple destinations that are available to us, but we only get there if we walk the path. And this is quite an important point. It is a positivist point. You can't go everywhere. You need to go somewhere. You could go nowhere. But to make the choice of what to focus on in your life means that, this is the basic thing, alternative costs in microeconomics, right? To choose one thing, it means you're not choosing others. And that is maybe the responsibility you need to take up, and it's the weight that you hold. To live in radical potential your entire life, to be this person who could do it all, but never gets it done, right? Means that you never actualize what is possible for you. You can want to do everything, but you have to choose to do something. So life is comprised, the unit of life is not a second, it is a choice. Right? Human life is comprised of choices. Let's say natural life is made of time, but human life is made of intention. And the unit of intention is choice. And to drive this point home, Rambam says, thus, human conduct is entirely in one's own hands. That's a radicalizing point. So we've seen, he is a radical anti-determinist. No compulsion is exerted, and that no external influence is brought to bear upon you that constrains you to be either virtuous or vicious. Vicious, what he means actually is full of vice. Not like mean. This is fun. Except inasmuch as, according to what we have said above, one may be by nature so constituted as to find it easy or hard, as the case may be, to do a certain thing. But that one must necessarily do, or refrain from doing, a certain thing is absolutely untrue. Let me read it again. That one must necessarily, by necessity, do a thing is not true. The mustness is his point. No one makes the choosing for us. No one schedules the practice in the backyard for us. No one sits us down to write in our journal to do our cheshbon nefesh for us. Because if they did it for us, it's not really being done by us. Right? I mean, to go back to the practice we talked about last week about cheshbon nefesh, doing a self-accounting. If someone were to program us into doing it, it becomes a meaningless act. The point isn't that the journal gets written. The point is that you write it. Right? The point isn't that reflections are written. The point is that you reflect on yourself. That you make the choice to engage in that practice. That you fashion yourself into being the person who does these things. In that way, we are not unlike God, in the sense that God too, God's essence, which is necessary, is not accessible to us. The only way we are able to access God, according to Rambam at least, is through God's actions and God's traits. We too, in a sense, are unknowable in our very core. The potential that lies in wait for us is infinite. Right? The butterfly effect, multiple worlds theories. What we could do is enormous. and far larger than 1,000,000 trillion lives. But what we choose to do is how we manifest, moment by moment, choice by choice. That is actually how we write ourselves into the book. Okay, thoughts. What I think the provocative trouble here, the kasha, I think that we lie in is this tension between radical possibility, but also in some ways the limits of what's possible. Right? Again, I can't be an NBA player. It's just the way it goes. So it's not like let's turn up the knob a little bit. Let's say some people are born with a genetic predisposition for an addiction of some kind, right? Or let's say you're born into a world which encourages certain kinds of addictions. For instance, the world we live in, which encourages addictions to all kinds of things through advertising, through social media. Social media itself is literally an addictive technology. It is designed to release serotonin in a way that mimics like a bump of cocaine. Like it literally, physically, physiologically addicts us to, the likes and the hearts and the whatevers. Point is that there are clear limits to our freedom. So how then do we still commit to being the author of ourselves? Being our own poets, our own creators. I mean that practically. I mean, how do we stay focused? How do we stay diligent? How do we stay committed? What are things that work for you? I think it's an important question to kind of leave in the back of our minds. I think one way actually that's helped me think of these things in terms of social justice is to think of the ways in which the world as we live it and the society we live in forecloses certain possibilities to some people and opens possibilities to others. I think of that things in kind of very basic staples, like Maslow's human needs, right? In terms of like who lives in parts of the city in which there is available food, in which food is healthy and affordable, who lives in parts of the cities in which there are education channels that will help them achieve their professional aspirations, right? These are resources that are available to some people and not others. But I would say that Rambam's point is that since everyone has the inherent right to become whoever they can be, perhaps actually we can see society's obligations then in terms of supporting people in achieving those rights, in actualizing their potential. That society has a right to make sure that everyone can actually have same access to that possibility of self-fashioning. Now, back to the original point that kind of framed, the original kasha, the original stira, the contradiction that we were looking at, both that we are the creators of our own lives, but on the other hand, we still, like what relationship to the past do we have? We become someone new, but on the other hand, we still have some kind of lingering ghost-like attachment to who we once were, right? Is that ever erasable? And if it is erasable, is that even good? So Rambam actually kind of pushes back subtly on that point. Because while in Hilchos Teshuvah, in his Laws of Teshuvah, he does kind of quote that Gemara, but without citing it, of course, because he never cites the Gemaras, because Mishnah Torah is actually supposed to take the place of the Gemara. It's kind of like Reader's Digest of the Talmud for you. But he writes that, like he says, you can become a new creature, right? We actually even saw that in the previous text we saw, in the one about the shofar. The shofar wakes us up into becoming someone new. You change your place where you live, you change your habits, you change your name to become someone new. Okay, but in Guide for the Perplexed, right, which is a deeply Aristotelian work, and because of that, has a lot of what we can call naturalism in it, Rambam is committed to, let's say, an evolutionary style of analysis. For instance, in Rambam's theory of prayer, he says that it's not bad that we don't have sacrifices anymore. Sacrifices were necessary in the time that they were commanded, because that is how people worshipped them. That is how it worked, because of the socioeconomic situation, because of the anthropological situation, et cetera, et cetera. But as history went on, we developed this thing called prayer, in which now words have taken the place as offerings that animals and animal life or vegetative life used to have. And that's good because actually human nature evolves, and so does then the way that we relate to God. It becomes a more refined form of prayer. And eventually, he says, we'll even go beyond prayer into meditative contemplative silence. Point is that he's not locked into any one manifestation or form. Thus, we should not be locked into any single manifestation or form. But something has to come from something else, because foundational to Aristotelian philosophy and natural philosophy is cause and effect. Whatever we end up becoming has to be caused by something. And because of that, there is a relationship that can't be undone. There's a great question about, okay, what happens when Mashiach comes in the third temple? So Rambam has a naturalist account of the Messianic age, in which he agrees with Rebbe Shmuel, if I remember correctly, that there's no difference between this world and the next world except for Malchus Goyim Bilvad, right? Except for the divine providence and except for like the sense of like some kind of sense of Jewish either autonomy or even like Jewish dominion, political rule. And there will be sacrifices, but the sacrifices might be perhaps in a transfigured form. They might, there was the Book of Psalms, right? Like they might be prayers in the end. It's unclear. And Rav Kook kind of takes up that point too, that the sacrifices will be transfigured and evolved. Given his vegetarianism, that the sacrifices will be vegetarian in the third temple, according to Rav Kook. Yeah, so Rambam's kind of more evolutionary-based account. It says, like, we move forward. Now, not everyone agrees, but we're just kind of inside of Rambam right now. So, point, that everything is cause and effect. God is the, cause of causes, the primal cause, the Nimtza Harishon, the first existent, right? The pool cue that hits the white ball, that hits the cue ball, that hits the other balls, right? That knocks the balls into the hole. So, new things happen. Right? The 8-ball goes in the corner pocket, but it's the cue that hits it, right? So there is a chain of transmission of cause and effect in which the koach hapoal benifal, as the Maharal says constantly, the power, the potency, the potential of the cause is in the effect, right? It's the way you look at a baby and you see its mother's nose, right? Like the baby is a new creature, but on the other hand, is clearly made of parts that the baby inherited from parents, right? The baby grows, enfleshes, becomes something new that's neither its one parent or another, but on the other hand, clearly comes from those parents, right? Whether it's genetic parents, biological parents, chosen family, etc., we are made of the influences that form us. But that's the stew, right, in which we're simmering, in the genetic stew, the behavioral stew, the cultural stew, and then which gives us the nutrient soup we need to become who we're on the road to becoming. So we're both our cause, but also we're something new. There's that delicious dialectical tension there, that therapy pills are made out of. So Rambam says, for a sudden transition from one opposite to another is impossible. You cannot wake up tomorrow and suddenly be the person you wish you were because you're frustrated with who you are now. It doesn't just happen on a dime. Therefore, a human being, according to their nature, is not capable of abandoning suddenly all to which they have become accustomed. You don't just change suddenly, because change is not something that happens to you. Change is something you do. Right? You don't just suddenly magically transform into Josh V 2.0. Tomorrow you're Josh V 1.1, and then the next day you're Josh V 1.11, and then the beta version crashes, and then you have to go back and you have to scrub it. And eventually, though, you become Josh V 2.0, right? Eventually you get there, but it's made of steps, and it's made of versions, and it's made of a process, a practice that takes time. And again, it's in a sense what time is made out of. It's that becoming someone new. but made of someone you were. Okay, so how do you do that? Or how do you present the beta version of who you are? How do you start beta testing new versions of who you can become, right? Or in the model that Rambam uses, quite beautifully, in my opinion, is, usually people will say it's medicinal, or it's like a doctor. Now, not coincidentally, Rambam by profession was a doctor, right? Rambam was the court physician of the king in Egypt. But I would actually call it therapeutic, in the sense that medicine is also a therapeutic practice, right? It is it is a diagnosis-oriented attention practice in which you try to figure out what is ailing or hurting or off or wrong, and then you apply to it a treatment of some kind to alleviate the pain, and though to, at least in the case of curative medicine, to cure it. Therapy, I think, is a more kind of wide-ranging notion. It's not just about applying drugs or prescribing, medicinal cures or something like that. It is about finding the right course of treatment and applying it to the area that needs attention. All right, that is the pain, the feeling offness, right? Is your body telling you, hey, I need a little bit of help right here. I need some help in this part of me, in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, right? In your, what have you, right? That is our bodies speaking to us, or our souls speaking to us. And as we've spoken about before, Teshuvah is really learning, actually, a practice of listening and attention to what it is that needs that kind of help, or that kind of attention. Okay, so in such a contingency, specifically when you notice that type of experience, that type of feeling of pain, a feeling off, something that needs help or attention, it is proper for one to resort to a cure, a treatment, exactly as if one's body was suffering from an illness, right? So spiritual ailments also deserve treatment, and you would treat them much in the way like a doctor would treat your body. So just as when the equilibrium of the physical health is disturbed, and we note which way it is tending in order to force it to go in one direction or another so that it returns to its sense of balance, proper condition. Just as when the proper adjustment is reached, we cease this operation and have recourse to that which will maintain the proper balance. Now, Rambam subscribes to this notion of the golden mean, Shvil HaZahav, as he calls it, the golden path. And by that what it means is the right way to be is not extreme, but rather moderate. Except when you are an extremist, in the sense that if you are somebody who is prone to anger, the treatment Rambam recommends is to go all the way out the other end and to quiet yourself, to become meek and humble in a very extreme way. The notion is that you are counter-treating your natural inclination so that you will eventually end up in the middle. You will eventually end up on the calmer side of things, but knowing how to deploy your anger judiciously, let's say. Because, for instance, hatred deserves anger, wickedness deserves anger. Ohavei Hashem sinu ra, it says, right? The lovers of God despise wickedness. So anger is sometimes appropriate, right? Hatred is sometimes appropriate when applied to the correct object, but not as a natural tendency, let's say. Similarly, being calm is, let's say, generally a good trait to have, except that what if you're calm in the face of injustice? What if you're calm in the face of indignity, or the indignity applied to people who are vulnerable, right? Then that is a forsaking of your responsibility. Okay, so your personality, says Rambam, deserves treatment just like your body would, right? Maybe it's like obvious to us now in a world of psychologists and therapists and the like, but I think it's quite revolutionary in the Middle Ages, that your soul deserves treatment just like your body. Just like you go into the hospital for a broken arm or something like that, your broken soul, your wounded soul, your pained soul, your regrets, your frustrations, your disappointments, your feelings of persistent not there-ness deserves treatment. You deserve help, and it deserves to be attended to. just like you go to get your broken foot fixed, it is just as natural and is just as obvious to Rambam that you'd go to have your hurting soul attended to and treated. And here's his point. Yeah, Susie.
But I thought our souls are supposed to be perfect. So how can our soul need fixing or mending?
Yeah, so I in this case, I'm using soul in a little bit more of a holistic sense, like the word psyche in Greek, right, means both mind and spirit. I see soul in this case as being like whatever the repository is for our self. I guess maybe you can say self. I think the notion like the self, I see the soul as a dynamic faculty or aspect of ourselves which reflects who we are and where we're at. I think perfect, imperfect, right? We're human beings. It is dynamic. It is holy. It is full of change and growth. And thus maybe perfection is not natural to it, but maybe as this kind of, this account is describing, it's striving for healing, striving for growth is maybe what it's comprised of. God. Chat comment? Question is, did soul doctors have a name back in the day? Yeah, rabbis, just hopefully.
Really? No, I feel like someone once told me, but I completely forgot. I was just curious if maybe you knew. There were some that could like look like maybe they were rabbis, but they had a specific like name that, you know, they could look at a person and like know what was like broken with their souls and like prescribe literally like a treatment plan.
Yeah. I mean, there's super cool history of stuff like that for sure. Cynical. But you know, there's actually a really interesting essay. There's a whole kind of like cottage industry of texts that Lawrence Fine, a professor at Mount Holyoke, although he's emeritus now, did on Lurianic Kabbalah, in which Isaac Luria had a whole series of different like spiritual perceptions that he used to treat people's soul. There's a great book by Lawrence Fine called Healer of the Soul, Physician of the Soul, Healer of the Cosmos. That's the best English language treatment of Isaac Luria that is available. It's very comprehensive, and he focuses on actually Lurianic Kabbalah as a kind of like spiritual medicine of sorts, spiritual therapy. And one of the really fascinating talents that the Arizal had was that he could look at your soul through your forehead and see what it is in you that needed fixing. Actually, maybe directly to Susie's question, there's actually a notion of tikkunim, right? A tikkun, like in the phrase tikkun olam, right? A tikkun in Kabbalah is to repair that which is needing healing. And our souls need that just as much as the world does, because the world is a soul as well, right? The world is a spiritual object or even subject as well, made of all of our souls.
That's so cool. Do you know? I know I don't want to like derail.
So
it,
it's a skill called metaposcopy.
The forehead thing.
Which you would look at your forehead and see what in your like prior reincarnations, your prior lives, like is the cause of your current stuckness or whatever it is that you need to figure out.
That's so cool.
It's really wild. Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, this is also where like notions of ibur or dibukim come, right? The notion of these spirits that cleave to you. Some of them actually are coming from the souls that you're attached to, because these were souls that you had past life and connections with. So there's this whole kind of like, spiritual genetic anxiety that's getting played out in your life. Really cool actually too is actually a friend of mine on Twitter who's like a Kabbalah enthusiast. Has a really neat actually thread about Isaac Luria's ability to perceive the language of birds. Just a different point, but Luria's spiritual virtuosity is born out of his extrasensory and extra-human perceptions. And one of them is to like listen to bird song and to be able to like decode it. Birds have a really cool place actually as kind of prophetic spiritual creatures in Judaism. There's piyutim, there are poems that are devoted to the birds, and because of their song. Every year, when we read Parshat B'Shalach, which is when we read about the crossing of the Reed Sea and the song at the sea, it's called the Sabbath of Song, Shabbat Shirah. And on it, there are these medieval and early modern poems that are written for birds, because birds are the channels of song in the world, and they sing God's praises with beauty and bring beauty into the world. So there's all these poems on the song Shabbat for these creatures of song. Really beautiful stuff. Okay, back to our wounded, broken souls. So know, however, that these moral excellences or defects, the things that we love about ourselves, the things that we are frustrated by, right? The things that we're proud of and things that we're disappointed in or blocked by, our growth edges, cannot be acquired or implanted in the soul. It's like anti-Matrix, right? It's not like you can just like plug in like a Super Nintendo cartridge and suddenly you can do Kung Fu, right? That's the dream, right? But I mean, actually think about, this is why Rambam's an Aristotelian and not a Platonist. The Matrix is super Platonic. It is, you are a ghost of a soul and the body is just an illusion, right? Because you are just a program running in this big computer. That's all you are. Your body actually is just grist for the CPU mill because it's been turned into a bio battery. But Aristotle, right, Plato is, right, the forms, right, the spirit is detached from matter. But Aristotle, spirit and matter, form and matter always come together. Because for Aristotle, things are becoming. They don't just be. They don't just happen. They have to become themselves. Spirit informed by matter. Or matter informed by spirit, rather. You can't just plug in a cartridge and suddenly you can do Kung Fu. The way you learn is by means of frequent repetition of acts resulting from these qualities. Malcolm Gladwell is just cribbing from Rambam, right? Which practice during a long period of time accustoms us to them. What is learning, says Rambam? It's habituation. Learning is practice. Practice, practice, practice. And then take a left. Life is practice. We are practicing life. And I don't mean like because the real game is later. Right? Practice in the sense of making it happen, doing the thing, committing yourself to what it means to deepen, ground yourself in what it is that you're working on. Practice like you practice law, right? Practice like you practice medicine. Practice like you practice your career, right? You practice like you practice your passions. Praxis, perhaps you can put it. Bringing something into action. Doing the thing as a commitment of intention into choice. Structured like pedagogy. Because the point is your work, I mean, it beautifully maps to halakha, I think. Judaism is a practice, right? What does it mean to be Jewish? It's not to have a certain creed. It's to practice. But practice isn't just the things that you do. It's the commitment of self to that structure of life. And Teshuvah is the soul of halacha in the sense that it is the commitment of self to the practice of self. There's no external universal code because we only learn the steps we need to take by listening to ourselves. So it's radically subjective, radically individual, radically individuated, but it's universal in the sense that it's something that we all must do. But it's programmed or tailored for each of us. There's a beautiful saying that I'm going to misquote from Epictetus, Stoic philosopher, who said, God says to us, the Stoic God, whatever, says to us, don't despair, because don't you see that you are the one best tailored or best fit to care for yourself. You are patient, loving, and kind. Attend to yourself. it's this beautiful paradoxical hyper-reflexivity. You are yourself and thus closest to yourself. You are the one best then positioned to care for yourself because you know yourself best. Nothing is in between you and you. The only question is, are you going to listen? And can you also see how great of an honor it is to be put in charge of yourself? What a holy task that is, that we are all charged to do. To be our own spiritual therapists, to be our own spiritual caretakers, to be our own spiritual carers, to care for ourselves. Maybe a nurse, actually, is a better metaphor than a doctor. Are we going to be the ones who treat ourselves? And I think that's a beautiful thing about the English word treat. Are you going to treat yourself? Not like sense of cake, but in the sense of like, are you going to treat yourself? Okay. Moving forward, yes. Treatment, yeah, exactly. Okay. Now here's a beautiful, beautiful point. Let not a Baal Teshuvah imagine that they are distant from the degree of the righteous on the account of the iniquities and sins which they had committed. If you are a Baal Teshuvah, it is so easy because the only way to be a Baal Teshuvah is to make a mistake, is to sin. And thus you look at the people, the rabbis, the saints, the goody two-shoes who are always good, always good, always well behaved. You say, oh, I've messed up. They're so much greater than I because they've been so good. So first of all, everyone messes up. It says that very clearly in the book of Psalms. But second of all, even though let's say some people like are perfect angel saints, who knows? The Baal Teshuvah actually should not be comparing themselves to the saints, to the righteous, and should not be self-castigating because of the mistakes that you have made. It's not so. For the Creator considers the Baal Teshuvah beloved and wanted, as if they had never known of sin. Moreover, their reward is great, for after having partaken of the taste of sin, they have done something amazing that the perfectly righteous have never done. Because after they've done something which they could keep on doing, they've separated themselves from it and decided not to anymore, which is an act of heroism. Ezehu Gibor, it says in Pirkei Avos, Hakovesh es Yitzray. Who is the hero? The one who is able to conquer their natural inclinations, to conquer their urges, to not be determined, but instead to choose. To throw up your hands and say, well, I have this natural inclination, don't blame me, is putting the wrong person in the seat. Because what you're really concerned about is being blamed. Whereas what you really need to be concerned about is, are you happy? It's not about whether someone can look at you and say, tisk, tisk, bad boy. The real point is, are you going to look at you and say, am I proud of myself? It's moving from let's say, an external perspective to an immanent perspective. And the criteria you use are purposiveness, not categories. Am I being purposive or not? Am I driving myself towards my destination? Is this helping me or not? The Chachamim said, Makom shebalei tshuva aimdim ein tzadikim gemurin yachayin lamod bai. The place where the Baal Teshuvah stands is a place the righteous could never stand. It's the opposite. Lahefech, adarabah. The Baal Teshuvah is the one who is actually greater than everyone else. You'd think it would be the righteous because they've never made a mistake. But it's not about being perfect. It's not about being static. It's about growth. The perfect never change. The Baal Teshuvah is defined by the changes that they've decided to make. And that makes them incredible. Okay, so we spent most of our time with Rambam. I do want to, before we wrap up, which we should do soon, I do want to touch also on Rav Soloveitchik, who is one of our greatest interpreters of Rambam. Here's another famous Gemara, really provocative Gemara, really perplexing Gemara. So Reish Lakish says, Gedola tshuva shezadonos na'asais lo kishagagos. Tshuva is amazing. Why? Because sins that you did on purpose are transformed through tshuva to become sins that you did by accident. And then later down in this text, the Gemara says, wait a second, didn't Reish Lakish say, Gedola tshuva, shezadonos na'asais lo kizechuyos? Didn't Reish Lakish say that tshuva is amazing, miraculous, incredible, because sins that you did on purpose, things that you decided to do intentionally, are alchemically transformed to become merits. Not just accidents, but benefits. So let's actually try to get at his point, both of them, both versions of this statement. Right? So to say that tshuva transforms intentional misdeeds into accidents, into mistakes. What does that mean? It's kind of perplexing. It's quite perplexing. The way I take it is that I think people often see like tshuva as if something suddenly transforms into something else, but it's not. Tshuva, as we've been talking about, is a practice and a process of growth, changing from one thing to another. So, as we change, so too then our relationship to our past changes. And I think there's two ways to relate to this. We do something, and the person that we were then did it on purpose. But now that we're actually changing and evolving, growing into a person that has a different perspective on things, you now regret what you did in the past. And that's like it was now an accident. Because the person you are now wouldn't want to do that on purpose. The person you are now relates to those things as things that, in a sense, you were compelled to do because of the person that you were. But then you realize that that's illusory, that that's a mistake, because in truth, we're not compelled. We are free. We're free to become the person we want to be. And then because of that, then it's as if they were compelled. It's as if the things that we did when we thought we were free, we were actually, in a sense, ensorcelled, right? We were tempted and persuaded, seduced into doing things that we regret. And that's the thing, to regret something isn't a bad way to relate to something, because to be trapped in regret is unhelpful. But to regret something is also a sign of detachment and a sign of propulsive moving forward when it's attached to tshuva. Right? When it's attached to a positive articulation and actualization of who you want to be becoming, what you want to change towards, not just feel trapped by what you wish you hadn't done. Because that's the miracle of tshuva. Tshuva transforms the past because it is a positive critical relationship to it. The critical relationship to the past is fuel for the person you are becoming. So and Reish Lakish in a even more intense statement says, no, it actually becomes a benefit. These aren't even sins anymore because what they become is fuel for your tshuva. These things that you did, which you would not want to do again, are not being endorsed. Like, oh, you should go sin. Go just like chow down on a pork cheeseburger, whatever. Go, speak harshly to your friends. Go be a jerk because eventually you can do tshuva. That's not allowed. We see that very clearly in the Mishnah. It says, one who says, I will sin and repent, I will sin and repent. Tshuva doesn't work. Yom Kippur doesn't work for someone who does that. You can't say, oh, I'll sin now and I'll do tshuva later. The only way you can sin on purpose is if tshuva is not even in your mind, because you are inside of it. But once tshuva becomes part of your life, and by that what I mean is once you see a path forward into a growthful evolutionary becoming of the person that you want to be, the mistakes that we've made, the things that we regret, are transformed actually into good things for us because they still are us. Because we needed to be that person then to become the person we are becoming now. It's the launching pad for the future. That's what the past is. And the present is the ignition, right? This is incredible. I think right now we are in a world in which is very scared of regret. We're scared of self-judgment. We're scared of these kind of self-critical orientations. But I think Teshuvah actually gives us a really productive way to engage with that type of self-critique. Because it's not about making a judgment about how bad you were. It's about learning from the past through judicious, right, analysis, through actually with integrity and with attention, learning from the text of your life to figure out what it is, what story you want to be telling, what person you want to become. Regret isn't a trap. Regret is the first step towards the next path. He also has this beautiful dyad between Teshuvah me ahava and Teshuvah me yira. Teshuvah you do from love and Teshuvah you do from fear. That I don't want to get into at this moment, but it's really something worth thinking about. What, in terms of our motivations, what's impelling us? What's encouraging us to do Teshuvah? Is it from a sense of fear, a sense of, let's say, negative critical judgment of ourselves, of being worried that we're going to be judged? Or are we changing because we are loving the person we are becoming? We are excited about presenting this person to God because this is what it means to be in a relationship. To be, again, as Rambam said above, because the Baal Teshuvah is loved and wanted. Okay. Do we do the Max Shaler quote? No, but download the source sheet, because if you really, Max Shaler is very, very, very important, as is Hermann Cohen, another early 20th century Jewish philosopher. Very, very, very important for Rav Soloveitchik's thought. It's a really, really cool passage, which you should definitely attend to. It is a bit too technical, I think, to get into right now. But I'll summarize. We'll do it outside. That Shaler says, and Shaler also like a phenomenologist, very attentive to living in time. Students of philosophy are aware of the person I'm not referring to right now. Living in time. So every event in the past has the capability of affecting every future event. In other words, things are not set. Right? Actually, you see the thing Elon Musk wants to like create like an implant so we can like play videos in our brain of our memories, which I don't think is. Phenomenologists are rightly skeptical of this. Namely, memory is not a thing that occurs. Memory is a story we are is a play that we are restaging, made out of sense memory in our brains. Right? Memory is a narrativizing act. It is not a thing that occurs or happens. It's a thing we do. Yes. Yeah, no, Elon Musk is definitely of a Black Mirror variety in the world. It is a boring dystopia that we are living through right now. So point is that like the past is not just something that exists neutrally or objectively. The past is still alive because it informs our present and directs our future. But again, it's not the past as like these objective blocks of memory or experiences. It's the way that we relate to it. We live forward. We are continuously accreting experiences, which change our perspective. Our memories help us fashion who we are and who we want to be. Our past experiences give us knowledge and insight and perspective and et cetera, et cetera. Right? The past isn't just a thing, the past is a story. And we change what the story means as we relate to it and as we apply criteria to it. The past is a problem, says Shaler. Not like a problem like you're a problem child, but a problem like a thorny Gemara that you need to read. It's a kasha. The past is something demanding your attention because it deserves to be figured out. The past is telling us things we need to learn. So in that learning, transforms and becomes something new, just as you do. The past is revised and revisioned as we see it anew. So says Rav Soloveitchik, says the Rav, Teshuvah is a retrospective reflection upon the past, separating out that which is living in it from that which is dead. Harsh language, but what he means is, what is still organic in our past experiences, that is still alive in us now, and what is it that we need to be sloughing off like a snake gets rid of its old skin, like a bird hatches from a shell, right? What do we need to be growing from, and what do we need to be growing to? What in the past is continuous with us, and what in the past is discontinuous with who we want to be? But the key to that is retrospection and reflection and adjudication, right? Sifting through your experiences to learn from them and to figure out what they mean to you. Teshuvah is a vision of the future. So it's a relationship to the past, a retrospection to the past, and a projection into the future. Right? Retrospection and projection. A vision of the future in which one distinguishes between a future that is already present and one that has not as yet been created. In other words, what is naturally flowing out of the choices you're making now, and what exists dialectically in terms of the absence? What's the future that you want to live in but is not yet on your path? How do you align your present to point you towards the future that you want? All right? How is the present flowing naturally into a future? And how does that then compare or contrast with the future that you are hoping for? And lastly, Teshuvah is an examination of the cause located in the past, in the light of the future, thereby determining its direction and destination. Direction and destination. Who's in the driver's seat? Says Rambam, says Soloveitchik. You are. And the map, right? The GPS. No voice is telling you where to go. It's not GPS, it's a map. You need to read it to figure out where you're going. You examine the cause to see how it is resulting in an effect. You look at the past in light of the future. Gedola tshuva shezidonos na'asos kezichuyos. Teshuvah is great because the things in the past become the material for the future. The past doesn't exist. The past is a dynamic story that we are consistently telling ourselves to make sense of ourselves, to be the first chapter to the next volume, to get us onto the story that we want to be telling. There it is. Ooh, that's very big. Okay, the bigness of that image means that we will not focus on that. It's cheating anyway, because it's a secondary source summarizing Rav Soloveitchik. But we can get it from the primaries, because that's what we do in this class. We go to the text. The act of tahara, self-cleansing. I think, again, that sense of becoming someone new, right? You go in the mikveh, and you become someone new, right? It's not accidental that you go in the mikveh for gerus, right? For conversion, to become someone new. You go in the mikveh to refresh yourself, to revive yourself, to renew. The act of cleansing oneself, renewing yourself, refreshing yourself is not supernatural, but psychological. Again, psyche, mind and spirit. It conveys one law in mental causality, Although a cause is given, the effect need not equal the cause. Oh, sorry. Although a cause is given, the effect need not equal the cause. Although a cause is given, the effect doesn't need to equal the cause. What does he mean? The past has already happened. You've made choices. But what those choices become is still undetermined. Because you've made a mistake doesn't mean you are mistaken. Because you've made a mistake doesn't mean you are a mistake. The mistake is good if it can provide you knowledge for the effect it can become. Teshuvah is this miraculous alchemy, not unlike forgiveness, in which the choices we've made are always potential for choices for whom we can become. Just like we are not determined, neither are the things that we've done objective or by necessity or fixed in time, because those two are transformed in the ways that we relate to them and we decide what they mean. We decide what they mean. A person themselves may determine the vectorial character of the effect and give it direction and destination. We are vectors, barreling forward. We are always moving forward. We are futural creatures. We are oriented towards the future. The past feeds into the future. The past only means what we determine it to mean. We are free to become who we want to be. Yes, so Susie just asked if this is similar to a Kabbalistic teaching that to change your future is to change your past. I would say that is a Jewish teaching. And I think that's a very kind of pithy and good way of relating to what we are talking about. The choices we've made have occurred, but the past, ironically, is still undetermined, depending on the future that we decide on, the future for ourselves that we commit ourselves to. Everything in our lives can be for the good, because it has brought us to the point in which we can learn from it. That's not the same thing as endorsing everything that we've done, agreeing with every choice that we've made, promoting everything that we've done as we've decided. But they're all radically replete with potential, just as we are. We are free to become who we want to be. Powerful thoughts, powerful words, powerful message. Incredibly difficult, but immensely, in my opinion, inspiring, because we are unfettered. We are actually only fueled. All right, I wish us that power and that commitment to ourselves, to what we are, what we've done, to learn from it, transform it to become for the best, become the version of ourselves that we are excited about becoming. Have a great Shabbos. It's not too late if you want to come in-person services Saturday morning at Bethlita. There's a link to register for it, and there's Zoom Kabbalat Shabbat tomorrow evening as well, and one more week of the series. Also starting, I think next week, we will also do we'll do 2 sessions on liturgy from Rosh Hashanah and liturgy from Yom Kippur. I think next week's session we'll do, or the week after, before Rosh Hashanah, we'll do a session on Rosh Hashanah. Before Yom Kippur, we'll do a session on Yom Kippur. So feel free to reach out to me about texts you want to focus on, and we will, it might be in person, but even if it is in person, I'll still record it. So it'll still be, I don't know if I'll be able to simulcast it, but there will be a still recorded version. Thank you all so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
good evening.
Josh.
Yeah. All right. Take care.